about Assange and the prison conditions that he is facing in a new article from the Gray Zone and Kit Clarenberg. It's reporting on a new file, a new trove of documents that were given to the Gray Zone, revealing some communications in the Australian government about Julian Assange. Now, the main part of this article is highlighting how Julian Assange, who is an Australian citizen, has gotten zero help from his government, despite his government understanding the cruel treatment that he is facing. As an American, this angle of the story is the one I've covered least on the show. I think there's some importance to it. I think that there's a possibility that, this could be a route for Julian Assange to at least get better treatment, maybe a little bit more fair treatment, if not outright get him out of jail. However, I know the least about this, the political dynamics in Australia and how that all works. And so the part of this article that I thought would be really important to talk about on today's show is actually, Julian Assange's conversation, then the Australian government's understanding of his prison conditions. And so Julian spends 23 hours a day in his cell and then is only allowed a half hour of outdoor time. But at times it doesn't happen and he really doesn't get an explanation for that. And so this is a really cruel and psychological, torture that they're putting him under, where, he has like 1/2 hour a day where he would be able to have something, it'd be hard to call it enjoyment, but, a little bit of physical stimulation is really important for the brain. And if you're outside and you're seeing different things, natural sunlight again could all be very, very good for you. And so this being denied to Julian Assange on an arbitrary basis is a really vindictive and terrible thing to do. Now, maybe it's just some lazy prison guard sleeps through Julian Assange's outside time one day or something like that. But it's just absolutely unacceptable way to treat anyone, to, have them locked up this long and then deny them without explanation the one enjoyable thing they could do every day. Now, Julian Assange apparently was supposed to meet with this person a second time, an Australian official who traveled and met with him in the Belmarsh prison. But Assange is only allowed a couple visits a month, and I think there's exceptions made for his legal team. But I think that, like, if he were to meet with Nils Melzer from the UN or, this Australian official, it would cost him his personal visits, and that's time that he could get to spend with his family, his 2 young children, no matter how restricted and awful that must be, to, have to visit with your children in that way. I think I heard a podcast with Kit Clarenberg and Kevin Gostola, and Kit was explaining that was the situation that Assange was in. So there's potentially more that we could learn about his prison sentence that we haven't yet, just because, he's choosing to spend the little time that he gets to spend with people outside of his legal team and outside of his jail cell with his family. And, maybe they're not talking the terrible conditions he's in all the time, since his 2 young children are probably there for at least some of the visits. Although I'm not sure, what the situation is, that they're allowed out of the prison or not. There's also the issue, I guess, that the UK has brought up, that Assange would be allowed more time out of his cell if he would work under a work supervision program. Now, there's multiple problems with this, and, I wonder if Assange wanted to, if he would even qualify and be able to. And I think there's pretty strict standards on this, but, this is a form of not so far away from slavery, where basically you tell people that you have to stay inside of an 8x6 box all day, this tiny like parking space of a box. You have absolutely nothing for stimulation, nothing to do, no exercise equipment, like a hole to poop in, and that's just about it. Somebody comes in once a day and gets you a little bit of food under the door, or probably 2 or 3 times a day, I guess. And then, you could get out of there, but the only way you could do it is by going to work, but they're only going to pay you $13 a week. And so, this is essentially like slave labor wages. They're really not paying anyone. The payment would be getting out of your cell. But this is, essentially what's happened in many American prisons, where you are punished if you're unwilling to take up either prison jobs or outside labor jobs, where the prison gets huge amounts of the money that you actually make, and you only get to keep a few pennies of the the many dollars that you earn. And if you don't participate in that, they throw you in solitary confinement and stuff like that. And so this is another form of torture that Julian Assange is undergoing. He is reported to have 2 violations since being in the Belmarsh prison, and one of them was for apparently having a razor blade in his cell. I'm not exactly sure what the details around this are, if it's confirmed from the Assange side that this was the case, if maybe he alleges that it was planted or a fabrication. I don't know. It seems very surprising to me that he would be able to get himself a razor blade. So that would be the one big question that I have around that. And then the second violation was for not having a tidy enough cell, which is just absolutely absurd. And then a third violation could result in him losing his exercise privileges, the 30 minutes a day that he gets to go outside. Now, another thing, that really cruel thing that they did to Julian Assange here in Belmarsh is, they did give him some medical work. They say, Kit says in this article, he got some antibiotics, but they also told him that he was HIV positive, which Assange had no idea of. And then they went through multiple other tests, and I think the prison's kind of explanation of it was it's a false positive, although these are extremely rare. And it seems to me that this would be a way to really, send somebody off of the deep end. You wondering if he had been tested before he was with his current partner, wife, Stella Morris. He would wonder if he got it from her, because so a lot of kind of paranoia and craziness in a person to bring this up and tell them that they have an STD that they actually don't have. And so yeah, I think that's most of what in the article, describes his prison sentence. Again, there is a lot of important stuff out in here about how Australia could do something to help Julian Assange. And, for anybody who's an activist in Australia, I really encourage you to work on that and see what you could do. I guess with the current Australian government in Morrison, that doesn't seem likely. There's another good article out on Julian Assange in general. This goes back to the Guardian's reporting of Julian Assange trying to either get like a passport to Russia, or to or alleging that he met with Paul Manafort, and these both added to the Russiagate hysteria in the fall of 2018. And so this is, again, published at Min Press News by John McEvoy and Pablo Navarrete. A very good article here by these two. They interview a few people for this article, and specifically Antor Martinez, who was a lawyer for Ecuador, who was actually the guy who was working with the Assange team on putting together some kind of package situation in 2018 to get Julian Assange, or it might have been before 2018 actually, to get Julian Assange out of the Ecuadorian embassy. And according to the Assange legal team and according to Ecuadorian officials, that the plan was to give Julian Assange a diplomatic passport to basically make him a citizen of Ecuador, and then give him a passport and make him a official to the Ecuadorian embassy in Serbia, and this would give him kind of a permission to travel from the Ecuadorian embassy in the UK to Serbia. And the end of the way international law is supposed to apply, this is supposed to be legal. Now, I don't know if this actually would have worked. It seemed a little bit like a bad idea to me. But at the same time, who knows? Maybe if you really thought like the UK was that committed to international law that they would let this happen or something. They make clear that the Assange team was only considering Assange going to countries like Serbia, China, Venezuela, Greece, or Cuba, and specifically did not want Assange to go to Russia. At some point, there was some offer that came within the Ecuadorian government to have Assange get a passport to go to Russia, but the Assange team absolutely 100% rejected this. And so this narrative directly contradicts what The Guardian reported in September of 2018 with Russia's secret plan to help Julian escape. I think the original title of the article, and they change it to sources say. And again, that article alleges that Julian Assange had this plan to go to Russia. And it fueled a lot of the Russiagate speculation that, Russia had the DNC, given the emails to Julian Assange, who then helped, Trump win the election with those emails because Vladimir Putin was in control of all of this. And, see, here's proof that that's what was trying to happen. However, the actual story really cuts against that because the Assange legal team rejected the idea of going to Russia. Now, there's another part of this story that's very interesting, and that is that after they had cooked up this plan, and I guess we're, talking about Assange going to another country, whether, Serbia, Cuba, or something like that, the plan was nits because the U.S. ambassador to Ecuador showed up at and said, listen, we know Julian Assange is about to leave the embassy using a diplomatic passport and we'll never allow it. And so as I had assumed that the Americans had Julian Assange try to do this, would have either orchestrated his arrest or had just done it themselves. And so there's a couple things here, I guess, that are interesting. One, up until this point, at least, the Assange team was unaware of the extent of the surveillance that UC Global had in the Ecuadorian embassy. Because, they were planning this and the American government became aware, they obviously weren't using enough secret communication methods, or maybe we're just talking about open in the public because they thought that this was impossible. And so, this is a really interesting part of the whole story is that the U.S. was spying on Assange and his legal team so heavily, they knew about this plan. Let's see. Then the another part of this that's really important is there are emails that were exposed between the Guardian and UC Global. And UC Global is the firm that was contracted with the Ecuadorian government to provide security at the Ecuadorian embassy in the UK where Julian Assange was staying. It was exposed by international media, the Grey Zone, and also Yahoo News that UC Global was working with Sheldon Adelson and the U.S. government to get communication, spy on everything Assange was doing, and even the U.S. government talked about the potential of using this information, and I guess potentially UC Global, in a plot against Julian Assange's life. But it actually went as far as the firm trying to steal a diaper from Julian Assange's partner to try to confirm that her kids were Julian Assange's. So this was going on in the embassy and this spying. And so we now know that the Guardian was emailing UC Global asking them for information about the Paul Manafort visit that they alleged happened between Julian Assange and Paul Manafort in 2016. This was another key link in the whole Russiagate saga. It was proof, again, of the collusion between WikiLeaks and the Trump administration and further Russia. Russia to steal the election from Hillary Clinton. However, what it actually shows is that from the communications that the Guardian had with UC Global was unable to turn up Paul Manafort being at the embassy, which is absolutely critical because this was the organization that was surveilling every secret thing that was happening at the embassy. And so, there's two ways, as pointed out in this mid-press article, that it should have been very easy, like cut and dry. Like, you can't disprove a negative, but you can actually kind of disprove that Julian Assange didn't meet with Paul Manafort in 2016, because you know exactly where Julian Assange was 24/7, every last hour, every last second of every day in 2016. He was in the Ecuadorian embassy. And knowing that means that if you have that building surveilled and Paul Manafort didn't come to that building, you know that Julian Assange didn't meet with Paul Manafort. Also, there was CCTV of that building that the Guardian reviewed, and at least has not published any positive confirmation of Paul Manafort's, visiting the embassy. And their corrections to this story, which, go to sources say, report, this kind of language makes it seem that they actually don't have any confirmation that Paul Manafort was ever at the embassy. And so, this article really does a great job of explaining that it's absolutely unconscionable for the Guardian to not retract its story and reporting here that are critical to the falling apart Russiagate narrative, and also smear Julian Assange. And there's a real big question mark here too about what the Guardian was doing, spending more time asking UC Global about who was at the embassy or not, rather than reporting on the fact that UC Global was spying on Julian Assange and his privileged conversations with his own attorneys. Seems to be a much more groundbreaking story, especially since, it's the U.S. government that's looking to prosecute Assange that's behind all this spying and surveillance. One last story on Julian Assange, a little bit of a good note, as far as it could go for somebody who's in a situation like Julian Assange, and that is he's gotten permission after a little bit of legal fighting to marry Stella Morris, his partner in prison. I'm not sure what the, actual procedure here will look like, if he will get to kiss his wife or the no contact rule will apply and, it'll just be more of a legal formality. But at the same time, these are two people who have two children together, so obviously, have a deep relationship. So I'm sure, this is far more than just like a publicity stunt or a legal maneuver or anything like that. And it's great for that reason that they get to be married. But I will acknowledge too that this may provide Julian with some additional help, legally, in various different ways, in the US especially, but also in the UK. If Stella Morris, is technically his wife, maybe, she would get to have more visits with him and stuff like that. Or, if he ends up being in a more medical, terrible situation, but if his medical situation gets worse, I think that would give her like more automatic authority over his care and stuff like that, which would be really important, as terrible as it is to think about. So good for Julian. Hopefully, that is something enjoyable, something he likes and is happy about, even though I'm sure there's very little with his present situation that ever feels anything like enjoyable.